Good evening and welcome to the Alliance for Unity weekly broadcast. It's been some weeks since I spoke to you directly, through this medium at least, although my colleagues have done a wonderful job week by week, racking up very impressive viewing figures and showing people the breadth of talent and the breadth of the political spread, if you like, in the Alliance for Unity. I said right at the beginning, and I think we have proved it, that we are left, right, and center. We are blue, green, whatever. We have only one goal, and that is to do everything that we can, hopefully in association with others, to knock the SNP off their perch, to stop the never-ending, to get Scotland off the hamster wheel of endless peregrinations about the constitutional issues in Scotland, whilst the country and its services go down the plug. And that's exactly what has been happening. And I hope you'll forgive me, the targets are too ripe to leave unplucked, to go across the card, if you like, of SNP failures just in the few weeks since I last spoke to you. The Sunday Post, of all papers, is breaking records every week, spanking all the other sections of the Scottish media with revelation after revelation of the malfeasance and misfeasance of the SNP administration at Holyrood. Just starting at the latest and possibly the most egregious, possibly the most sinister of all the revelations of the last few weeks about the way the SNP Green Front minority administration are running Scotland was the Sunday Post's revelation that autistic children in Scotland are now in a locked, criminal, secure mental hospital called Carstairs, where when I was young, mass murderers used to be incarcerated, where people with potentially dangerous mental illness are incarcerated. That's where the SNP have put our autistic children. You really couldn't make that up. And so far as I can see today, nobody has followed up this Sunday Post exclusive. And yet it is a mark of shame on Scotland. Almost impossible to exaggerate the seriousness of this news. And I hope that the people who are paid to be the opposition in Holyrood, the Conservatives, the Labour Party, and the Liberal Democrats, will now pick this issue up and demand answers of how it came to pass that some of the most vulnerable children in our country, autistic children, were locked up in Carstairs. I, for one, want to know the answer for that, don't you? Of course, it's not just the way the SNP treat our children, and I'll come back to what they're doing to our children in just a few minutes. But we already know that more than 2,000 of our old people, our grannies and our granddads, have been sent into the care home carnage with, thanks to the Sunday Post again, with ministerial direction. The SNP administration attempted to put the blame for this onto physicians, onto the hospitals themselves. How cowardly was that? But the Sunday Post revealed that the minister, I can almost not bring myself to add her name after the word minister, Jean Freeman, was the person who directed this policy, even sending old people with confirmed coronavirus infections into old folks' homes where there was no proper personal protective equipment and no means by which the other elderly people in these care homes could protect themselves from the coronavirus, which ministers in the Scottish administration had sent into their midst. Hancock got a lot of stick today for telling kids not to kill their grannies. Well, the SNP did kill our grannies. They killed 2,000 of our grannies and our granddads. And I, for one, again, will never give up seeking to hold to account those responsible for that care home carnage. And of course, the coronavirus has taken off again. After all those weeks, months, in which Nicola Sturgeon was lionized by the London liberal media in particular for her handling of the coronavirus, it has now turned into Scotland's shame, Scotland's disaster. We are the third worst in the world in terms of the outcome of our coronavirus pandemic. Just think about that. The third worst in the world. And despite the crowing, absurd, ridiculous crowing that things were much worse than England, which turned out to be yet another SNP lie. There's lies, there's statistics, and there's SNP statistics, which are invariably also lies. The coronavirus in Scotland is now running rampant. 28 schools have now suffered a new outbreak of the coronavirus. Now, Nicola Sturgeon was pretty damned quick, you might say, not just to shut down Aberdeen, but to condemn in the most resolute way the Aberdeen footballers who had gone out for a drink after a football game, a bit like the leader of Glasgow City Council, Susan Aitken, went out for a drink with her mates. Nicola Sturgeon damned Aberdeen in the strongest possible terms, shut down Aberdeen. And yet, now that we have an outbreak in Glasgow and in the west of Scotland, far worse than the outbreak in Aberdeen, all that's been said is you have to keep the heed. Is that the norm now? Is that what we can look forward to in a separatist Scotland? The abandonment not just of English, but of Gaelic and Ned speak in its place? You're all told to keep the heed, ne mehr pertes. Well, I don't know about you, but that seems to me a singularly insufficient response by the SNP to the lockdown demands of health professionals who are alarmed, terrified at this gigantic spike of hundreds of cases in the Glasgow and west of Scotland area. Now, I'm not blaming Nicola Sturgeon for the coronavirus. I'm not like her. I don't blame other people for the coronavirus outbreaks, for a pandemic which has swept the world, killing hundreds of thousands of people. But I do blame her for blaming other people instead of attending to her own responsibilities, the dereliction of which is plain to see every day on television, because Nicola Sturgeon is using these daily broadcasts not actually to get to grips with the coronavirus pandemic, but to score political points in her obsessive, really fetishistic pursuit of what she calls independence. I put heavy quotation marks around the word independence, of course, for reasons which I'll turn to in just a few minutes. Then there's Hamza's hate bill, which is now opposed by Scotland's judges, Scotland's lawyers, Scotland's police force, by civil liberties groups, by the Roman Catholic Church, by other Christian religious organizations, by anyone with half a brain who can see that this unique, bizarre effort to come to terms with hate speech, to come to terms with hate crime is actually going to achieve precisely the opposite. And yet, Hamza, with all his grasp of legal affairs, a man who got sacked from his last job because he got caught driving without insurance and moved to be Justice Secretary. Instead, Hamza is demonstrating his absolute ignorance, but also absolute arrogance by pressing on and on and on with this legislation, even though it is virtually friendless. Surely even the gardening section of the SNP, the so-called Green Party, cannot possibly go along with this. And then there was the ferries fiasco. Where do we start on this? Scotland, a land where the QE2 was built, which was building ships of steel and sailing them around the 7 seas, laden with our manufactures in the 19th century, never mind the 20th century, is incapable, it seems, under the SNP, of producing 2 CalMac ferries, despite the throwing of scores of millions of pounds into the company. I've looked closely at this whole affair. If I'm elected to the Scottish Parliament, trust me, I will go through that deal like a dose of salts. And there are some things that I cannot, for legal reasons, yet divulge to you. But somebody, and maybe more than one, needs to be prosecuted for the ferry fiasco, the grotesque waste of public money, and the incompetence, negligence on a fantastic scale simply must be punished. Otherwise, governments can do exactly what they like with our money. Millions upon millions upon millions of pounds, which were desperately needed for other services and other problems in Scotland, were wasted on these ferries. The Edinburgh Sick Children's Hospital. I could go on and on and on and on. And this all coming to a head in just the last few weeks. The Alex Salmond inquiry fiasco, where the husband, I think he's the husband of Nicola Sturgeon, is effectively dictating to the Scottish Parliament what documents, what evidence a duly constituted inquiry, duly constituted committee of the Parliament may have access to. Anybody would think they had something to hide. As a matter of fact, I know they've got something to hide, and I know exactly what they've got to hide, but I'll wait for Mr. Salmond fully to divulge that information. It wouldn't be right or proper to steal his thunder. But this gigantic scandal, a scandal with not just British but international implications and repercussions, has shone a light on the Scottish Parliament, which we were told was a parliament of a new type. Not the kind of parliament designed for me where you can stand up and make big speeches. No, it's not that kind of a parliament. It's an interrogative, forensic parliament with powerful committees, they told us, that can hold the executive to account. All of that has proved utterly hollow, shallow, false. And we will not put up with it. As I keep saying on social media, if elected, the Alliance for Unity MSPs will open the books. All of the books, even the dirty books, will all be open if we are elected to the Parliament. You see, we're not part of the club. We're not standing up with faux sincerity, wishing retiring enemies all the best. That's not for the likes of us. We're not applauding outgoing ministers whose record of catastrophic failure ought to be excoriated, not congratulated. We're not a part of that club. We will not let bygones be bygones. If we're elected, we will not turn the page. If we're elected, we'll turn back the pages to expose the grand larceny, the corruption, the immorality, and above all, the grotesque incompetence of Scottish ministers in this administration. So if you want someone to clean the stable, the Augean stable that is Holyrood, then I'm ready to play Hercules. I and my friends have a plan, and I turn to it now. Because no matter how often it's said on social media and on these broadcasts and on other platforms, still some people affect, at least, not to understand it. And the plan is this, that the big three pro-Britain parties, the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Democrats, negotiate with each other that only one of them stands against the separatist candidate in the constituencies. The best placed candidate should go up alone with the backing of all the others against the SNP candidate, whether incumbent or challenger. Now, what pleasure, what self-satisfaction, what honor, what point is there in being third in a constituency, or even fourth in a constituency, if your intervention in that election has caused the SNP to win or hold the seat? Really, ask yourselves that. What would you put that on your mantelpiece? I came third in such and such a constituency, or fourth, and I got 3,000 votes and the SNP won the seat with 1,500. This is why I keep saying this is not rocket science. You see, the SNP are not a party. They are also an alliance. They are an alliance for separatism. They have people from the far right, people with more in common than with the founders of the SNP, and ersatz Irish Republicans living in the East End of Glasgow who regard themselves as revolutionaries. They are an alliance, a cross-class, cross-political alliance, just like the Alliance for Unity is. So, you know, if three people, or even four, are going up against one who is supported by every supporter of separatism in that constituency, they're going to win. And if the big parties do what they did last time and the time before and the time before that, then the result will be exactly the same. That the SNP will win power on a minority of the vote and will spend their time in office not governing in the interests of the people of Scotland, not building Scotland's economy and its public services, but simply getting their ducks in a row to have another go at a separatist referendum. So, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. If no one party can defeat the SNP, they must join with each other in order to do so. It's not as if the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, and Labour are markedly different in their political approach. Nowadays, this is narcissism of the small difference. These three parties are all broadly centrist, broadly social democratic. That's why I'm not in any of them, because I'm not any of those things, but they are. So let's ditch this false tribalism, clannishness, and unite in the greater good. And then when they have reached such an agreement, the big three parties should talk to us about all of us standing under one banner, the Alliance for Unity, with Conservatives, Liberals, Labourites, and us as the people on the list in the regional seats. And we tell all of our supporters that they should be voting Alliance for Unity in May of next year. Just think about that. If our plan was followed and was successful, there would be 88 pro-Britain MSPs in a House of 129 in Holyrood. Just imagine that. Then we could have this government of national unity of which we speak. I'll not be in it. Let me make that quickly clear. But some of my friends are able and willing to serve in it. A government of all the non-separatist parties, which can begin the job of repairing the damage that has been done by more than a decade of utter incompetence and worse at the hands of the SNP. Does that not sound to you like a plan? Now, I haven't given up on that. Time is running, of course, and we in the Alliance, in the absence of such agreements, have no choice but to pick our own candidates just in case no agreement can be reached. But if agreement can be reached, then we can accommodate everyone on our lists. And if every supporter of unity in Scotland voted for that list, then we would sweep the boards. We would have 88 out of 129 seats. What a difference that would make. Now, we are still making the political weather in Scotland, I know, even though certain sectors are still reluctant even to mention our existence. The BBC, for example, in 8 weeks, has not once even picked up the phone to talk to me on background, to get our thinking, to hear our plans. That's a dereliction of duty from a public broadcaster, which we're all forced to pay for on pain of imprisonment. But SNP TV in Cowcaddens hasn't been in touch either. The Daily Record is only in touch when they want to smear us. One of their people called me this very day to put to me the rumor that he had heard that a certain person was financing us. A rumor quickly disposed of when I explained that that person actually has no money, and B, nobody is financing us. Not a single person, corporation, entity of any kind is financing us. In fact, I'm rather sad to tell you that 8 weeks on, we still have not expended a single brass farthing, halfpenny, penny, groat, or Scottish dollar. Our expenditure remains zero. But as we get closer towards the elections, of course, we'll be asking everyone to put their money where their heart is. Because this is not politics as usual. This is not business as usual. This is not an election for a here today, gone tomorrow government. Tuppence on the income tax, tuppence off the income tax, this public service or that instituted or scrapped. It's not about domestic politics, this. It's existential. It's about the continued existence of this country. The election next May could decide to bury the neferendum and get back to normal politics in Scotland, or it could be another step on the descending staircase to separatism and the division of our country, which would be fatal for Britain, would be terminal for Britain, from which there would be could be no going back. That's why we have to set aside tribalism, clannishness. My social democracy is better than yours, and therefore we must fight it out amongst each other in the election. This is not the time for that. This is do or die. This is, does Britain go on with its Long Island story after more than 300 years in a union set up at the request of the Scottish Parliament, not the English? Will the union, will the country come to an end? Questions don't get much bigger than that. Now, I wanted to finish by talking about the European Union, because the SNP are jumping up and down today about the possibility, that's all, that Britain will be leaving the European Union on Hogmanay with no deal. That's rich, coming from a party which, if they had had their way, Scotland would already have left the European Union 6 years ago with no deal. The referendum that we are intending on stopping is predicated on a change of circumstances, namely the exiting of Britain from the European Union. As you know, I supported Brexit, as did 1 million other people in Scotland. And I don't regret it. But I accept that there are many of you, most of you, majority anyway, who didn't agree with Brexit. But here's the point. The SNP did everything that they could to wreck Brexit, to defy the result of the 2016 referendum. They must now lie on the bed that they have made. They are hoist on all the petards on which they sought to hoist the Brexit decision. David Cameron made a number of strategic blunders of enormous importance in agreeing to the perfect storm of the SNP and their terms for the referendum in 2014. Never again. If we are ever going to have another referendum again, and as I've said, we say once in a generation is more than enough, and 25 years is a political generation. So 25 years after the last one, we might have another, but its terms will have to be completely different. David Cameron gave Alex Salmond everything he wanted. He gave him the franchise. He gave him the question. He gave him the timing. And he gave him an Edinburgh Agreement, which ought to have had carved in stone that this is a once-in-a-generation referendum. We'll not make those mistakes again. The decisions on all these matters belong with the Westminster Parliament. That's the law. And Nicola Sturgeon is always saying that she will obey the law. Well, the law is clear. Devolution is devolved power. Power devolved is power retained. The Westminster Parliament will make all of these decisions. And here are some of them. First of all, we can never again allow Scots living temporarily outside of their own country, even serving in Her Majesty's Armed Forces outside of their own country, can be denied a vote. We cannot have the captain of the Scotland football team denied a vote because they're playing for Liverpool or Manchester United, whilst the captain of the Lithuanian football team does have a vote because he is temporarily living in Edinburgh. Never again. All Scots, all of us born in Scotland, must have a vote, because all of us would automatically become citizens of that independent Scotland if it were to be created. That's a fact. That's a chiel that win a ding. Secondly, the question, and the Electoral Commission has already opined on this, can never again be yes or no. That's inherently, intrinsically unjust, wrong. The question must be, do you wish to remain in the United Kingdom, or do you wish to leave the United Kingdom? The timing of it must be by agreement, 25 years or so from now. But once we've had it, and if perchance the majority voted for separatism, and do bear in mind, please, that it takes a 66% majority to change the constitution of the SNP, but they imagine that they can destroy a country of more than 300 years standing by a simple majority of those who turn out to vote in a referendum. But the decision made in that referendum would then have to be followed by a withdrawal agreement negotiated between the administration in Edinburgh and the government in London. And then, of course, it would have to be put back to the people in a confirmatory referendum, a kind of people's vote. All of these characteristics will be familiar to the SNP because these are the very demands that they made over the Brexit referendum in 2016. A withdrawal agreement, a confirmatory referendum, a people's vote. So that's our view on things. I'll be back soon enough to talk with you again, as will others of my colleagues who've not yet spoken to the people. I urge you all to follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. I urge you all to join us as a supporter. I think it's £10, and we are badly in need of your membership and your active support, including financial support. And stay in touch with us and spread the word about us, because we are making the weather in Scottish politics. And for the next 9 months, we intend to continue to do so. Thanks very much for watching. I bid you a good night.